Jacobs? Here. Dr. Macri? She's here too. Ms. Pochiola? Here. Mr. LaTwinsick?
Present.
Chris Hikely? Karen DePerja? Any members from? No. Next time, okay. Board of Ed members, Selena Kelleher? Here. Catherine Ross? Here. Tipsy Post? Here. Alan Schumann?
Here.
Matt Zabrowski?
Here.
Paula Luna, she's up, yes, Heather, Jack Hennon, did you say?
No, he left.
He left, okay. And James. Is there anyone that I missed from the call?
And so Dr. Macri is here?
Oh.
Okay. Okay. First up, are we live streaming, by the way? Okay, good. Approval of agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion.
Second, anyone?
Second.
Thank you, Matt. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Agenda is approved. Thank you. Approval of minutes from the March 30th meeting. They were sent out. It should be in your packet. Is there any discussion on the minutes before we move to approve? Was there a motion to approve?
Yeah, I'll make the
minutes?
motion to approve the minutes.
Anyone second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Thank you. Approved. Moving right along. Now we're open to public comments. Is anyone in the public out there want to speak? Okay, go ahead. Please turn your mic on and state your name.
Anyway, my name is Jim Vincetti, 3 Greendale Avenue in Cromwell. I just have some questions about the athletic fields. I'm seeing that there's no plan for Lions Field to be replaced that I'm seeing in anything that you've put out. Is there a temporary solution for it? Where will the girls play when they don't have a field? Because they're not going to be able to play over at WISP because those fields are wet until May. So I want to know if there's a plan for that. If there is a plan, are we going to get dugouts for those fields? Are they going to have the same thing that the boys have? And is that middle school baseball field going to get redone? I've heard a lot of people bring up this question and it hasn't gotten answered. So I would like to know what the plan is. I know we've already approved to move forward with the new construction, but I haven't seen a plan to address any of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. I guess typically we're not supposed to answer questions, so I'm going to do it anyway. The short of the story is that we're still defining what that plan is, so we don't have answers today. We're working with the architect to figure out, like, the proposals we have right now are just concepts. So they're going to have to figure out, like, where to put the building exactly, how to orient it, how to orient the fields. There will be a baseball field. How it's oriented will probably change. How it's located exactly may be different than where it is today. The soccer field, we're not going to have a soccer field for a year and a half while the building's being built. That's going to move. But then at the end, there'll be a new soccer field. So just bear with us as we figure all that out. But at our last meeting, it was brought up that the baseball field will be affected, and we took note of it. And we're working with the architect to figure out what that plan is going to be. So once we know, everyone else is going to know. Anyone else have any questions or comments from the public? Okay, moving on. I don't have too much to update. I did have a meeting with Tony Salvatore Marianne on Friday, just talking about basically where our authority kind of begins and ends when it comes to adding things or removing things from the total project scope. And in summary, the building committee does have authority to add, if we wanted to add whatever that we felt we needed to add within the ed spec parameters. But we do have to keep mindful of the total budget. Obviously, we're going to need to have public approval, so but But as far as authority, we do have the authority to do that. We had talked about the funding for the mailings and the surveys. And their suggestion was to utilize digital communication lines like emails, which we are very limited. I think the only thing we could do is maybe send something. I'm not even sure if we could do that with the public school email address, but you have a huge chunk of the rest of the community that we cannot reach via that method. So we still don't have a clear direction as to where the funding for that will come from. So I need to go speak to them again to try to figure it out. So having that breakdown was very helpful. Karen, thank you. We did receive that today, the breakdown of those costs. I'd say if there's any way to drive that south of 10,000, it'd probably be more palatable. I don't know where we could reduce the costs, but if there is any kind of buffer in there, if we could remove it, that'd be preferred. So maybe just take another look at it again. And if not, we'll just approach, I'll bring it to Mary Ann. I think she just needed to see where that money was being spent in a little bit more detail. So we can provide that to her and then have discussion with her again regarding that.
Sorry, Roseanne, I mean, is there still a question as to whether just a survey blast could be sent out through to the school population? Just saying that there's a link to a survey as we're looking to gather opinions for the middle school? Because I would think that
I think you could
that
do that.
population
Right.
is fairly representative. I know it's not inclusive of people maybe
Right.
that don't have kids in the school system, but at least
Right.
it's
But I think the intent of the survey was to get general public opinion, right, Jessica or Heather?
Yeah, so I can add to that a little bit.
Yeah.
So the mailing that we were talking about and the survey that we were talking about was really intended to get to everyone in town. So we
Yeah.
want to make sure that we want to touch everyone in the community and hear their perspective. So if we're only able to reach out with emails and social media, we're doing our best to get the word out and engage folks, and it's wonderful to see people joining the meetings. However, we're not able to reach everyone because there may be folks in town that don't use email or don't
Right.
use Facebook or,
Right, right.
aren't looking on the internet. So we want to try and make sure that everybody has access to what's going on with the committee. So
And even if we were to put like notifications or anything in newspapers, that still has a fee associated with it. So either way, it's going to cost something to get to everyone. Do you remember what we did with WIS, Ken?
We had some kind of a funding source for,
Oh my God.
we had some kind of a funding source that the town had authorized for us to do mailings and things like that
Yeah.
prior to the referendum.
It'd be good to find out how much that was, and maybe we can use that as a justification, further justification.
It was 20 years ago.
Well, so with inflation, yeah, whatever that amount was, add inflation. Okay. The other thing I wanted to touch on was, and so we've been having a lot of, we kind of have a little road show going on with the communications team to get the word out. We visited a few spots this week. I'm going to let Shannon and Jessica and Heather talk about the events that they attended, but I'm just going to touch upon my meeting with the Republican Town Committee that was last night. In general, I think they were pretty favorable towards the middle school and the idea of a new middle school, and they were receptive to some of the justification and the need for the middle school. They did bring up some good questions, though. One of the questions, and I think this is probably a question for you, Karen, and for Tecton is, and I never even thought about this, but what type of, I don't know if warranty is the right word, but kind of, I guess, because I don't know a better word, warranty is associated with a brand new building versus if we renovated like that side of the middle school that for option 2. So they're just trying to see if there's an additional cost benefit with having like an extended warranty if you build brand new versus maybe the contractor wouldn't put as much warranty on something that's renovated because there's so many unknowns behind it, if that makes any sense.
It's usually itemized. by what the area is. So with the, like, for example, with the renovation, and I think somebody might have mentioned this too, if you're going to renovate and you replace the roof, the state looks at a 20-year roof warranty. If the roof is only 10 years old, but you're doing the rest of it, of course, you're going to do the roof, and they'll deduct something for that. But typically, any new work, it goes by its category, whatever would have a new warranty.
Okay.
So in a renovation, the new work would be fully warranted, just as a new construction on a new school would be.
Okay.
So there really isn't trying to get it to apples, there isn't a big
Unless there's
difference.
areas that they're not renovating, like the roof, right? If they're not replacing the roof, you're saying they would, or if they replace the roof, but,
Before its warranty it depends on areas that the state will look at.
okay,
That they attach years, warranty periods to.
okay. So
when
we're saying in
they're
general 20
evaluating.
years for a brand-new building, or just parts of the building are 20 years?
It varies. I
Yeah.
was just using the
Yeah,
roofing
yeah.
as an
Okay.
example.
Yeah.
They expect a roof warranty to be 20 years.
Yep.
And so again, if you replace it before that, you'll take a little bit of a hit
Okay.
for that because it's not up, but yet it's still practical to do it.
Right.
So-
Okay.
So I can add to that. In general, workmanship warranties are 1 year from the date of substantial completion. So that's basically the date when you get your certificate of occupancy and it gets turned over to the users.
Okay.
So it's 1 year, and then there's other more specific items like a roof or a finish. Yeah, a
And-
boiler, it goes up from there.
Yeah, and generally products and systems have much longer warranty periods.
Okay, very good. So basically like a year for everything that doesn't have its own warranty.
That's standard.
That's standard, okay. And for renovations too, you'd say would be, yeah, okay. All right, good.
Can I add a question to that too? Whoever knows, not only workmanship, but punch list items that maybe have not been done yet, that are overseen, will that be able to be extended beyond 1 year until they're complete? If we get little things, say, you're missing a door handle somewhere, and it's not workmanship, it's not a manufacturer warranty, but it's still not there and it's still on a punch list, that's got to go past a year.
In my experience, it's 1 year from the time it's complete. So if it's not there, or if it has to be replaced due to a punch list, then it's 1 year from that point. And that's usually spelled out in the owner contractor agreement.
But usually, when the work is complete, the clock starts ticking, so.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thanks.
The next question was around central office. You're gonna love this one. So the question was, first, why do we need a new building for central office? Why does it have to be? And explain, like, we're tearing down the board of the central office, so we need to put people somewhere. Why does it have to be near or connected to the middle school? And can we find alternate space for central office so we can save some money and put it towards the actual middle school as opposed to central office, was the general thought on that. So,
Wow, that's very sad. There's a lot of work that gets done at central office for kids. A lot of
I
really,
know.
really, really great people like Miss Hibbs.
Would, Dr. Macri, would you like to come to the podium and answer some questions? I think it would be good to know the benefits of, so let's start with location. What are the benefits of being connected to one of the schools? I'm guessing the middle school because you've been there, but what's the benefit of being connected to a school?
So I've worked in a district where we weren't connected, and I now work in a district that I am connected. Selfishly, being able to put my pulse and being able to talk to kids and see teachers and help when there's a huge outage. We didn't have enough staff, and Blaze and Ian could attest to. We had a huge outage. All of our kids in school, I wanted them to finish the day. I didn't want, or at least I didn't want to bother parents, to be honest with you, because I felt like we could make it through the day. However, we needed people to help get kids to the bathroom where there were lights. We needed supports. You needed more adults because the adults that were there were taking care of the kids. So central office just dropped everything they were doing, and we went in and we supported the school, and we were an extra support system. That's what I want our teachers, our staff, and our kids to know. We are not a disconnect. Central office, we're the behind the scenes making everything happen. We don't need the Taj Mahal. And if you've been in central office right now, it's a very tight space, and we have 1, 2, 3 people in one area trying to do really important jobs that have a lot to do with money, the financial piece, and there's talking. There's a lot of talking. There has to be talking, but there's nowhere for them to go and actually crunch numbers, and then there's opportunity for mistakes. We have an amazing staff who work their tails off all the time. Lisa's one of them. And I don't feel that what we're asking for is anything outlandish. One thing that people really have a hard time understanding is we don't have a sink in central office. So we have to wash our cups and everything else in the bathroom, in the sink at central office. So wanting a sink, I don't think is out of the ordinary. The connection to the people doing the work behind the scenes. So what we did in my prior experience, we would schedule, and it can be done, we would schedule walkthroughs with central office staff. So when they're crunching numbers and they're looking at grants and they're applying for grants, they actually see who's going to benefit, who are the kids, what's going on. And that's really important to connect the people behind the scenes to the kids and the staff. So those are some of the benefits. Another benefit, I believe, in the past was that it was an expense. There was nowhere else to put central office. I also believe that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, just because I wasn't here, I do believe that they may have had a conversation about moving central office to the town hall, but there's no space. There's no room for it. Yeah, exactly. So there really is nowhere to go, and I don't feel that self-care and taking care of everybody, we are human too. I know people think that I'm just a statue and I don't need, and actually my office is fine. I just want to sink. But it's an unhealthy environment too. I mean, Tommy can speak about the building. I don't have heat, and if I have heat, staff in the rest of the central office area don't have heat. So one of us is going to freeze. So of course I'm going to take the option of freezing before I let my staff freeze, right? Last week I walked into my office soaking wet, the rug, because the radiator or whatever it burst. So we had to replace that. Michelle DeMoro, HR, she has to take care of all the files, and she takes her job very, very seriously. Her office is this big with hundreds of files that she has to sign off on from the FBI, with FBI saying that she is complying with all of these rules and regulations. These are important things and functions. So you want to create a climate, and I think we do a really good job. It becomes frustrating sometimes for some of our people of feeling like they're cared about and they're heard and their needs are looked at. It's important. It's not about the superintendent having this big, beautiful office with new furniture. I could care less about any of that stuff. And those of you who have known me in my past district, I think you know that. However, there is nowhere else for us to go. If somebody wants to take us, that would be great. We can't fit. It's unfortunate for Tommy. Or he could say it's fortunate, but Tommy and his administrative assistant can't fit in central office, so they have to be housed at WIS. And Tommy's driving back and forth. We're in constant communication about our facilities, about our technology, about all of that. They can't fit there. We have very limited space for office staff, period. So what you see here is nothing out of the ordinary. We don't need, it's not the Taj Mahal, it's the bare basics. So Yeah, I would love for the adults to continue to be connected to the kids.
And what, is there an advantage to being connected to the middle school versus the high school or one of the elementary schools? Does it matter which school? Or is it just, we're building with the middle school, makes more sense to do it
Yeah,
there?
I think it's more of, if you're putting an addition, you'd have to put an addition on at the high school. That's kind of silly to put an addition on the high
Right.
school. If that's what the town would like to do, it's fine with us. We'll go wherever we're told to go. But I do believe that they did some research in the past, and there really is nowhere for us.
Okay.
Roseanne, I'd just like to add, too, that if you move central offices outside of the project site, you lose the portion of reimbursement from the state.
So that's what I was going to ask. There is a
Yeah.
portion of reimbursement for central, even though the square footage is in addition to the 83,000 for the middle school. We get the same rate as a new building that we get. Is it the same rate or is it a different rate?
It's 50% of the rate, but it needs to be, connected and part of the same campus. You still we'll have to do a separate grant application. It's kind of a duplicate effort, and they give it a separate project number, but it still would be eligible for reimbursement. Whereas once you move off the project site, you lose any contribution financially.
So the $2 million that was in the presentation last week, I can't remember, I don't have it in front of me.
I don't.
That was before the reimbursement?
I don't have the exact numbers with me, but I can get them to you.
Let me see if I have it here real quick.
Rosanna, we've got
think
it in
it's-
the
oh.
meeting minutes.
I was just gonna say, yeah, the meeting minutes, yeah.
Thank
the
you.
s-
I knew
Bottom
I
of the
just saw
third
it somewhere
page,
today.
yeah.
Okay.
They're basically like, yeah, 2.7
Okay.
million,
Oh, okay.
gross, and just a hair over
So it's
2 million net.
So almost 3 million. So 2.7, 2.8 million for the base costs, and then you get like half a million back in reimbursement. So, maybe we need to do a little closer look on the ed spec, just to make sure it all makes sense. We really haven't been focusing too much on it in this committee, but I think between now and our next meeting, we probably just take a closer look at it and just make sure that it makes sense or justifies that 3 million. Okay. I think that was the only other question for central office. Yeah.
More thing.
go ahead.
So when we have, and it does happen, we have students who are expelled as well. We have to provide tutoring, and we do use the library at times, but sometimes the tutors are more comfortable if central office, being in central office, and we have a very tiny conference room, one conference room. So we have run into the situation over the past year of trying to provide the best opportunity for a student to learn who is expelled, and we are required to do so by the state, and so should we. We want to make sure we educate all of our kids. But in doing that, we then have no conference room to use for meetings or for anything else. So I forgot to mention that as well.
So with the middle school though, in the administrative area that we're creating, I think we're adding additional conference rooms there, right?
We would add one area for special education, I believe, and then one for everyone else, because we need to start having families come back in and have PPTs in person and
Yep.
doing the right thing. We need to be more inviting to the community and open, so yes.
Okay. All right.
Storage space for all the files. Right now, they're in the attic. In the middle school, we're always fighting. I can't. Don't talk to Michelle tomorrow, because she'll have a nervous breakdown over it. We have to make sure we keep those for a very long time. There are rules and laws that we have to follow, and it's nice to have them all in one place under lock and key that we could go and retrieve them.
Are we keeping are we creating the new electrical room for Tommy in the central office area or in the middle school area?
In the middle school area, I believe. where's that? It's in the middle school, I think. Yeah,
Middle
I think
school area?
it's still in the school, middle school area.
Okay.
Because the whole tech team, we would not be able to house the entire tech team at central office. So we would need way more space. So the tech team has their office here. Yeah. Oh, that's right. We separated them and put one in each building. I forgot about that. We're trying to just utilize space the best that we can.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on that part? And then the last thing that came up at that meeting was, I guess there was a situation at WIS where the state basically sued Cromwell for, I don't know, over $1 million for whatever happened. So it was highly recommended we figure out what happened and we don't repeat that error. The only thing I can think of is that they expanded scope without notifying the state. I can't think of what else could have happened that would result in that. So,
Rosanna, were they specific enough in what the example was? Was it the building project for WIS, or was
Yeah.
it? Okay.
That's the first I heard about it.
That's interesting because Kendall was the chair. Weren't you the chair of that committee? I haven't heard anything, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. But if Ken, that was the first you, it could have happened.
yeah, I think it was eventually Christy Carpino made it go away, but yeah. So we should, for lessons learned, just so we don't repeat whatever mistake happened, we should probably do a little investigation, figure that out. So I did send a note over to Mary Ann because I figured she would probably know. And as soon as she gets back to me, I'll let you know what came up out of that. That's all I had for my update. So we can move on to old business, which is approving the bylaws. As we mentioned last week, we got that town council gave us their charge that they approved, and they allowed us to create our bylaws, which is an extension of it, which is basically just guidelines on how we will function. So are there any comments or changes to the bylaws that anyone wants to propose or make before we vote to approve them? If not, if there's a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Okay. On to communications subcommittee report. And I think Shannon's going to turn the microphone right over you.
Hello, everyone. All right, great. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yep.
Great. So the communications subcommittee has been working very hard to get the word out about the Cromwell Middle School building project. As we talked about earlier in the meeting, we do have a goal to reach the community, and we are taking advantage of every channel that we have at this time. So our website is constantly evolving and being updated by Heather, so please continue to take a look at it and share that with folks that you know in the community. In the packets that Lisa provided for us, it includes our communications plan. I would ask you to take a look at that and let us know if there's other things that you can think of that we maybe haven't thought about, and we can, discuss that further at our next meeting. I want to give people a chance to take some time and look at it. We are planning on being at Little League opening day on April 23rd, where we'll set up a table and put out a trifold board with some posters about the project and be there to answer the community's questions. I think that every team goes on opening day and there's photos throughout the day, so there's people coming in and out all day. We do need volunteers to help work at the table and be able to answer questions. We'll have also flyers and things to hand out. So there's a sign up at the meeting tonight, so I would please ask for you to take a shift so that we can all, support this event and be there. The more people we have, the longer we can be there and the more community members we can talk to. Earlier this week, I sent an email that includes a form to get out to the community to sign up for our updates. We do have to have people sign up and opt in to the emails that we will be sending. So just please share that so we can get more community members on that list. And there's an example of our first email in your packets if you're curious what that looks like. Then we also included a calendar of all of our events for you to take a look at. Let us know if there's other organizations we should be reaching out to. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on is the open house concept that we had talked about, inviting the community into the middle school. The communications committee is certainly prepared to support that and get invites out and all of that, but we do need somebody to help lead in terms of coordinating logistics and working with the middle school. So I would just ask if anybody is interested in that to, please step up and help out there. Then the last thing on the report, and I'll include this as we move forward, is just kind of let you know the reach and where we're going. So in the past week, we did provide 4 presentations to the ECS with PTO, the Cromwell Democratic Town Committee, the Cromwell Republican Town Committee, and then the Girl Scout Service Unit in town. And we reached about 88 people through those forums. On Facebook, we posted 9 times, and we reached 1,450 people. Those are not unique, so obviously there's duplicates there. We had 556 engagements, so that means we had people liking, sharing, commenting. And then we sent our first digital newsletter. We currently have 66 subscribers, and just over half the people that we sent the email to opened it. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Shannon. Okay. We have another opportunity for public comments. Does anyone else want to make any public comments?
Before about the communications, have we got clarification on whether or not we can go to school-sponsored events? So, for instance, the 5th graders are coming over in May to tour the building as an orientation. Are we allowed to do something there, or the band concert, or kindergarten orientation, or WISP Family Fun Night, or any of those kind of things?
Up until May 11th.
Up until May 11th. Okay, thank you.
Jim Vincetti. I'm also the president of Cromwell Little League, and I also represent RCP American Legion Post 105. I'd say we probably don't support putting turf at the middle school. I think it's probably a bad idea. I think we should probably think about the high school, a multi-purpose field there. We have a championship football team that has to play down at Pearson Park, and they almost got their game taken away from them by CIAC. And we need to do a better job with price creep on the project. It's going to get to a point where people aren't going to vote for it. So I know we have fields that are in town that are bad, but the town needs to address that separately. The WIS fields are horrible. The Pearson Park fields are horrible. The town needs to address that separately. I don't think turf is the right spot there. It needs to be at the high school first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. One last thing I wanted to add that I forgot to mention earlier was, for those of you not at the Board of Ed meeting earlier, the Board of Ed did vote to approve the ed spec with one change, which was to increase the stage square footage from 900 to 1,300 square feet. So that whole discussion we were supposed to have tonight over it pretty much goes away with that change. There are...
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the idea is to keep it at 1,300 square feet,
Keep
consistent with the
current.
existing, I guess. Yeah, this 2-pager here.
Yep.
But would it be a net, if we look at this second page of schematics, would it just be a matter of increasing that stage area, that dark purple area from 950 to 1,300, and leaving everything else in place? So
You'd have to expand the entire thing, so our square footage would have to go up by
Okay.
400 square feet.
I just want to make sure, because these 2 pictures make it look like net. You're just shuffling around how the space is utilized, and I think that's what the last slide shows. There's only a 15 square foot delta between the entire space. Yeah. Yeah, no, I know. Well, there's existing and then what the ed spec contemplated.
Right.
In that same space, yeah.
Right, what I mean is, if they say, oh, we'll just go back to the way things exist, and then you get 1,300 square feet, but we reduce the storage space, we take out the wings, that's what I was asking. So
Yeah, no, I think-
Net, when we look at this, it's gonna be compared to the existing auditorium, the updated comparison will look 300 square foot heavier, or more,
Right.
350 square foot.
350 square foot, and then keeping the storage space, the
As
control room,
contemplated
and
by the
everything
ed spec,
else.
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
It's just in the ed spec itself. They're gonna have to figure out how they're gonna arrange it all in the new design, but
Yeah.
as far
well,
as square footage area,
So
Right.
do we have
they
any?
just planted over the existing just to give you an idea of what it could look like, but it doesn't have to look like that.
Yeah.
So do we have any say in these kinds of scope, this type of scope creep? Because we just added 300 square feet of space in the most expensive part of the building.
I think
It's not $300 to $400 a square feet. It's probably on an order of 600 to 700. So we just added over $200,000 to the budget.
Three to $400,000 extra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we'll go back and review it. Sometimes how you configure it, and you look at the adjacencies, maybe there are other places, but we'll go back and take a look at that and see if it can be absorbed, or most of it can be in other areas, so.
So I was told by Roger that when you exceed 1,000 square foot on a stage area, it'll drive additional infrastructural changes to support that. And that's where most of the cost comes from. Like, they have to put some beams and fire retention stuff, like
Yeah.
all that stuff. So that's why they tried to keep it under 1,000 to keep from those costs. But once you cross over that threshold, you end up adding all those additional costs.
I also think, if I may interrupt, I also think that with the ed spec saying that the amphitheater should be built just outside the auditorium, it may have to be reconfigured, because right now the auditorium, the wall is right between,
This is an old.
that's an old one. Okay, where's the auditorium?
putting auditorium up
The auditoriums are here now, so it's gonna be right outside of the bus loop. I don't know if that's an issue or not, having the amphitheater right next to the bus loop, that's all. So as long as it can be refigured is what my point is.
I think once you get into the design process, there'll be plenty of opportunity to take a look at, to really thoroughly design it. We're really at the conceptual level. So all of those site improvements will be, the bus loops, the traffic flow, student drop-off, and it'll probably be somewhat different than what we're looking at today.
Even beyond what we get on April 8th, right? So, because April 8th is still just a kind of conceptual design spec.
All of this is
Right,
still
yeah.
conceptual.
Yeah.
I mean, once they have the final spec, they're going to actually go in and put some more fidelity into the design, and then take all these other
But we'll have to consider,
concerns
yeah.
into consideration.
Can I, Rosanna? Do you mind? I just, I'm not telling you what to do because you're the chair.
But maybe having a discussion with the building committee, because the question was definitely asked, and we had a pretty good discussion at the board meeting at 6:30, talking about the stage and the pros and the cons and why and everything. The choices that we were given regarding the size of the auditorium stage, it comes down to three choices, which kind of addresses your question, Kenneth, and I think it's important for everybody to know. In order to, based on our highest enrollment, we have to stay at the 83,313 square feet to get reimbursed. Going over, you're correct, that would be something that's on the town is responsible for. We may get reimbursed more or less, we don't ever really know, but the town has to be prepared to know that they would be accepting that cost. The decisions were, if we decided to keep the stage at the current size of the ed spec, we didn't need to change it. If we decide to increase the size of the auditorium, its current size in the existing middle school, then we need to add about 400 square feet, and the board said to go to the 1,300 square feet, not to the 1,350. So it's about 350 square feet-ish. We could reassign some of the storage space to the stage area to stay within our overall 83,313 square feet, which I highly, being in schools my entire life, I highly say don't do that, because we would have a really hard time storing things to begin with, and there is no storage space. So that didn't sound like a good idea to do. And then getting into the heart of the program, and we already scaled down to the best of our ability. And then the town, so I did speak with the town manager, and I thought it was a great idea, and they think it's a great idea to give us the numbers, to give you the numbers of if you're going over $300,000 or $400,000 in this project, what will the cost be? And Rosanna did some of the work already ahead of time of, what does it look like for taxpayers and for how long of a period of time? And they will attend a meeting. The board can vote again. It's very difficult to be neutral. I'm trying to be neutral and not be the superintendent, although that's what you've all hired me for. So of course I want my kids to have, our kids to have everything. But I want to give you the facts of making sure that everybody understands and knows that that is on, if we go above the reimbursable rate, that cost goes on to the taxpayers. But we are growing our arts program. It's the A in STEAM. We have a lot of students who, one of my interview questions when I was hired was, how are you going to grow the arts program that has been growing over the years? This is a way to grow it. We will have, if we build it, they will come. They are coming. The students love theater. It's a great way for them to express themselves. But you have to weigh, right, the benefits. What are the benefits? What are the risks? What's happening? I'm not going to tell you to have that conversation or not have that conversation. You could have that conversation. Rosanna can run the meeting and have the conversation instead of the superintendent taking over the meeting. But I think it's important for you to have that discussion. And then we could, we could go back to the board. But I think you knowing the impact on the programming, the students, the community, if we did have a smaller stage, and then also knowing the impact on the community, the taxpayers, which are all of you, if we did. So I think it's important for you to be very aware of both of that. And Kenneth, you brought it up. We're talking between $300,000 and $400,000 a year. But like I said, the Director of Finance, Marianne Sylvester, has offered to come to a meeting and give us some running numbers of what that would look like for taxpayers in the future.
I think, Matt, you already ran that number, right? It was like $25 a year per family on average, something like that.
I don't want to give. Numbers
rough
out of
numbers,
context.
like,
We're
yeah.
talking every 10 million bonded over 20 years, running at like $8 a month
For 10 million.
for 10 million of
Yeah.
additional bonding. So I don't know,
So
scale
for
it, but-
$300,000 would be a fraction of that.
Yeah, 30th of it.
Yeah.
But I think Ken's point, maybe it's just we have to work within the budget. So we're shining a spotlight, rightly so, on the auditorium. We're shading in some detail there, and I think that can continue. Based on we want the cost estimate. Once we get the cost estimate, and that gets used to decide the appropriation. Now we're locked. Now there's no more creep.
Right.
We know we have to work at, so then it just becomes jockeying concessions. Oh, you want to spend more on this? Well, then where are you giving it up?
Right.
But we don't need to bloat this thing too much ahead of time. So I don't know if we want to have the my opinion is if the existing stage is a certain amount and then we're regressing and going back with the emphasis on the arts and the public comment from Danielle at Company and Tempo about having to go out of town. If this could meet some of those requirements, I think you can say there is some community benefits. I think we're going to have to be mindful how we communicate. People look at the headline number for this building committee, it might be a shocker, but when you say, well, there were these things that go along with that, right? They're going to have
Right.
community uses
Right.
beyond just the student population.
Right.
Maybe that'll appeal to some, maybe that will be a turnoff to others, but I'm sure our communication team could.
If I could speak to this, because I did talk to Jacob Borgeson, who is our middle school course teacher and directed the play, and Molly Sales, who's our middle school band teacher. They now have about 1,300 feet now, and it is the bare minimum. She can barely get the entire band on the stage, and they have to store scenery in the hallway for the play. If you went to 950, the program would definitely suffer. They could not have the whole band on stage. They could not do a musical of the size they did. There are, between chorus and band, about 300 kids involved in the music program, which is about 60% of our population. For Beauty and the Beast, which was 2 years ago, they had 108 kids in the cast and crew of the play. So it is a huge part of what Cromwell Middle School is, and it addresses these, and particularly for these kids who don't do sports, for example, it gives them that team, that group activity. It is incredibly important to them, having been backstage and watching the energy and the commitment and the sense of responsibility these kids do. It would be a tragedy to reduce that and take that away, which a 950 square foot stage would unfortunately have to do. You just couldn't fit everybody on there. So
Blaze, is it because of like kind of the, I would say, COVID restrictions? Are they trying to keep themselves spaced apart?
No.
Or is that just they're squeezed in there?
No, that's squeezed in. The numbers are slightly suppressed because we had less people doing chorus and band because it really didn't exist during COVID.
Right.
No, it's simply getting all those kids, all those chairs, all those instruments. Now, my hope is that the 1,300 feet could be reconfigured, whether it's, less depth, more width, however that would work, so it would work out better. But as it is, backstage at Matilda, you took your life in your hands when I came out. There are kids pushing those desks out, and then they're taking out big walls out into the hall and bringing them back in. They just, it's amazing what they're doing with the 1,300. If you had less of that, I just don't think
wouldn't be able to do much.
it's conceivable that they could do something on this scale. And they've been doing them for 10 years, or it's a real tradition
So the
here.
community's already used to seeing all
Right, and they've done, all the way back from my son in Captain Hook, if you saw that, Peter Pan, 10 years ago.
Jessica, did you have a comment?
But so, they're very passionate, and they're willing to go to their parents.
Yeah.
They asked me, how can we tell our parents to come and talk? I said, absolutely. So there is support for it.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, so I do have a couple questions. So if, for example, we're demonstrating that the physical space of having X number of chairs and students on the stage at any given time is constricting our program, is that more likely to help us make the case for a waiver if necessary?
Yeah, I was going to make a question. Do you know what the rules for a waiver are, Karen?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of it's discretionary.
Discretionary on the state's part?
Yeah. But you do, you do have to make.
Because we really do have good cases
Yeah.
programmatically having a steam, because that's going to be our entire.
Right. If we have a larger percentage of the population involved in the arts within the school, I feel like that's a good case for a waiver.
I think, first of all, if it's tied to the academic program and the program space, and it is with the STEAM, and I think you can certainly make a case for it. And if it's only, we're talking about 300 or 400 square feet, I would think it would. I've heard they've been really tough on space waivers lately, but you make your case.
Yeah.
And again, I think the starting point is if it's tied to your academic program and curriculum.
Okay.
If you don't have that, then I wouldn't bother, but we do.
Okay.
So,
All right, thank you. And then a couple other questions. So in terms of the business case, let's say, so for what the investment would be for the additional 300 to 400K to expand the square footage, we did, Matt brought up the company and Tempo. What is that opportunity to bring folks in? So if we did, I don't know what the rental cost is associated with.
It's like $100 an hour plus if you have to have custodial services on top of that.
And so we probably have a case study that we could use for the high school, because it sounds like that's frequently used and often not available because there's so much usage. Are there, is there an opportunity for some of that to be factored in to offset the cost? I don't know what's reasonable. Maybe that's something that Marianne can take a look at.
So I think the cost, usually is just for, I would say, external, like companies and stuff who want to come use it. We wouldn't, I think we talked about, it wouldn't be for, if the students want to do something, we're not going to charge the students, right?
Yeah, even if it's a public building, it's taxpayer building. If an external group that 95% of the community lives here, they live here, they usually ask me to waive the fee, and I do, because it's the right thing to do, over 50%. And they pay for the custodial staff, which is expensive, because obviously we can't take that on.
Right.
But we waive the fee. It's the community's building. So I don't want anyone to think that this is a revenue source
Right.
when it really isn't. Yes, would we charge privatized? We do. Would more people probably ask to use it? Definitely. Would we make, as a revenue service? Probably not. I want to be honest about it. Just because, I'm not,
Right.
50% of our kids are asking to use it. I'm not going to be like, you got to pay for that.
How many-
It's still our
No,
kids.
I figure we need just to ask the question, because I anticipate that if we're thinking it, somebody's going to ask the question.
Right.
So even as the communication subcommittee, it could be in our FAQs.
Yeah.
So just to understand what that total cost is, what's the cost to the taxpayer? Are there any offsetting
Right.
potential
Yeah.
benefits if folks outside the community were to come in and use it? Because if
Yeah.
Company in Tempo is leaving Cromwell to go to Rocky Hill or wherever they go to do their
Yeah,
performances,
Weathersfield, yeah.
you could see it.
I think the
other
point
way.
that Danielle was making too was that if they don't have to incur that higher cost to pay Weathersfield, then just the
Yeah.
fees that the students pay to attend
Yeah.
the dances could be lower.
Yeah.
And then you have to think about the value, right? So if you're going to use it more because it's larger, you're going to get more value out of it than if it's used less because it's smaller. Does that make sense?
And you have to be careful, because even though we still incur costs, like when we still have to turn the lights on, we still have to pay those bills. So I don't want to mislead anyone and say, if a privatized company is asking to use it, am I going to say, you don't have to pay the $100 an hour fee? The answer to that is no. If a privatized, you're making money, it's not a 401c,
Right, yeah.
Right.
we will, but if it's a community-based, and then, it's a whole different story. So, but we're not getting rich off of it. We're paying for the lights
Right.
to turn on.
You're not losing money off of it.
losing, yeah. Otherwise, it's a loss.
All right, and then one last question. So when we toured Colchester, I believe it was William J. Morrison School last week, we toured their black box theater. Is that something that's an option? I know the dynamics of a black box theater is much different than having a stage, so that's definitely a consideration. But is that an option to consider versus having a classic stage, I guess I'd say? Okay.
You wouldn't be able to do that. You wouldn't be able to do what we do in a black box.
Okay.
Can I jump in? So I just wanted to jump in. So I have a couple points of reference on this topic. So number one, I am a alumnus of Cromwell Public Schools and graduated class of 2011. When I went to Fordham University for undergrad, I was president of our main stage theater club. I was also president or outreach chair of our theatrical outreach program. In college, I worked on 26 productions. So I worked on quite a bit of theater there. I'm also an active member of the Cromwell Community Theater, which is a Cromwell nonprofit, part of the Cromwell Arts Alliance that does theater in the town of Cromwell. I'm also working with the town LGBT committee and the Cromwell Community Theater to put on a production of the Laramie Project. And so a couple different points to break down. The first thing I wanted to comment is on the concept of, well, why does the stage space matter? When you put on a production, and I was also president of Cromwell High School Choir as well, class of 2010 to 2011. You use every square inch of that stage. You have bleachers, you have risers, you have the band students set up, you need to rehearse in the space. You have weeks of rehearsal beforehand. The space in the middle school, from my recollection when I was in middle school, is extraordinarily small. The program has grown considerably since I was in middle school, where we didn't have a drama program to speak of, to now we have a very robust drama program. The high school has gone from having all school productions of 10 or 12 students to having all school productions of multiples of that. And that's because the different spaces have been able to accommodate that growth. Arts education is really important. It gives an alternative avenue to those who are not vertically or athletically inclined like myself. But that's number one, the growth of the program, understanding and respecting kind of the growth of the program over the last decade. Point number two is understanding the community benefit. Danielle's organization is one. Cromwell Community Theater would probably want to do more productions, but just to kind of explain the context of doing the Laramie project, we're going to be using the high school. We wanted to do it originally in the spring, but we need to fundraise to raise more money to cover the custodial fees and other things. But then we wanted to do it in October, and the auditorium at the high school is booked from the third week of September all the way through the Thanksgiving break, essentially. So there's a 2-week window where our organization can be in there, and it's towards the beginning of September because it's just that booked. And we would want to do more activities if we were able to, and if there were more spaces. And there are only 2 auditoriums in the town that can facilitate or hold any kind of performance. And a performance is not just a theatrical thing. There are other types of events that go on that utilize a stage and a stage sound system. And then the question about a black box theater, a black box theater is used for intimate, smaller performances, smaller ensembles, smaller pieces. You would not be able to do a band concert in a black box theater. You wouldn't be able to have a recorder concert in a black box theater. You wouldn't be able to have a choir concert in a black box theater. And in Cromwell, at least when I was here, kids are required to take at least one arts education or arts enrichment courses. And even if you're not taking choir, there's utilization of the auditorium for other purposes within that arts education. So I think thinking about it as a dormant space that is used for one performance is not the right way to think about that space. Theaters are, I think libraries, theaters, and gymnasiums are the 3 beating organs of a school through which all the students move. And I really think that's the way to frame when we look at what's an extra 400 square feet. Same thing with the gymnasium. 400 square feet may be the difference between playing one sport and not being able to fit that sport into the space. And I know the conversation always comes up with past building projects. Wouldn't it be, we messed up, we missed the boat on this. Now we wish we spent the extra money and invested in X, Y, and Z, because now it's it's undersized, so it's underutilized. And here, from the presentation that the chairperson put on at the Board of Ed meeting, I learned that you're losing some seats here. But you're trying to save some of the stage space so that you can continue to put on the programming that you need for your students. So I think there's a lot of different aspects. It's not, as a theater person, it's not just you have a performance and then it sits vacant. It is a living, breathing part of the school, and I think Cromwell has done an extremely good job of building both of the programs up at the middle school and the high school. And then from a community perspective, from a community arts perspective, there's no other space in town other than these 2 spaces. That's it. You can't go to ECS and put on a play. You can't go to WIS and really put on a play. There's an active senior theater group. So I think there are ways to frame these issues to show the community benefit, the education benefit, and to think of it from a different perspective. So those are just my
James,
thoughts.
what's preventing the Cromwell Theater Group from utilizing the middle school stage right now?
From my personal perspective, I think that the high school has a better light and sound booth, and that would be a better format to put on productions because the technology is better there right now. You have a sound booth that's the sound booth is, and for those of you who don't know what a sound booth is, right, we have a beautiful soundboard right there. If you have performers mic'd, the larger your soundboard is and the larger your sound system is, the more folks you can have mic'd at once. The light, when I was in college, right, I learned how to wire and hang lights. The more lights you have, the more you can do on the stage and the more different areas you can light for solos, or the more creative you can be with how to do it. And one of the things at the high school is I know that there are certain students who get extra training and extra attention because they're interested in those things, and there's not a equivalent system set up at the middle school. The high school is just a nicer facility right now, but if you were to have 2 facilities in town that could be utilized, you'd be able to have a lot more utility out of them. It's the, I think of it akin as, why have 1 softball field when you can have 2? 2, or if you build 2, I can promise you that they're going to be utilized more if they're up to date and they're able to be accessed. And having worked on 26 productions in college and in Cromwell schools, I worked on 4 productions, and community theater I've done 2 or 3 now. The space is used, and there's not a lot of extra space in the existing facilities. I mean, when we did Wizard of Oz, we had set pieces in the hallway because we just couldn't fit them backstage in the larger high school stage setting. So it's just really the space, 400 square feet, is going to be used in an immense way for any stage.
And would you say wider is better than like depth?
I would say personally, why I think wider is better than depth, and I think that for a couple reasons. Unless we have really intricate sets and a better fly system where you can fly things in and out, or your actors, your actresses are going to be using from the lip of the stage probably back to the mid stage, as that's where the sweet spots are. You're going to have your choir set up in the middle, but I'll give you an example from when I was in middle school, right? Baby grand piano on that stage has to be rolled on and off. You couldn't roll it off because there wasn't any wing space for it, so it just kind of lives in the curtain and then gets dragged back out. Now, let's say you're doing a play and you need to have a pit or you need to have the piano be utilized. It's not moving. There's nowhere to put it. There's nowhere to move it. If you have wing space, there's a lot more flexibility for the backstage setting up for whatever happens next. For places for students, let's say they're in a choral concert or a band concert and they are not on stage, they can be somewhere else but still be in the stage area ready to go for when they come back in, versus having to have them in a hallway or in the school play setting in the high school, right? We had kids sometimes stay in the band room waiting to be called in, and we'd have to set up a speaker in the band room to play what's inside the auditorium. So even at the high school, which is a bigger facility, you're still running into problems. So 900 square feet for a stage is extraordinarily small, and it would demonstrably limit the usage of that space.
School auditorium was not designed as a theater. It is designed as an auditorium, so it doesn't have any wing space. It has no flight space. It doesn't have any lights. They have to rent lights and put them on poles on the side. So it was not designed to be a theatrical arena. So that's one of the other reasons why it can't really be used by other people.
That's part of my problem, is we're comparing space from a building that is a space that's frankly very awkward for a theater. And we just added 300 square feet because that's what they have now. Or 300, 400 square feet. What we should really do is ask the architects to do a space plan with what we need.
So the high school right now has about just under 1,300 square feet.
Oh, that's good to know. I was going to ask that. Okay.
And it feels small if you ask Mr. Sinclair, which Blaze did. He's like minimum 1,300 square feet. Based off of the experience of the high school. If like the high school is, what you're kind of comparing to, you would definitely not want to do anything smaller than that. And even that's stretching their capabilities. Any other discussion or questions on the stage?
Sorry, I'm going to ask one more. Why does this say 250 to 500 seats maybe in the ed spec overlay?
I think 250 is the minimum that's in the ed specs, and it depends on the configuration, which they really didn't dive into. So like the existing theater, I think, has 2 aisles. You could go to a single aisle. There are different configurations. So there's flexibility in that number, I think, is the point.
And we wouldn't get reimbursed for anything over 250 seats.
That's right. Okay. But we'll have to, I guess, decide though whether. Well, we're paying for the square footage, right? Not just the physical seat, but.
That's probably something that we don't have to address right now. Again, we're at the conceptual level. We're just trying to get the grant application in. So working that out would happen during the design process.
Yep, that's fine, as long as we've made
Yeah.
sure that the budget number that we're gonna appropriate
Right.
for is contemplates flexibility.
Right.
When they do the cost up, they're going to assume 250 seats or 500 seats?
I'll find out.
Because I think you'd want to lean towards the more conservative end of 500 seats, whatever the maximum number is.
No, that's different because they're fixed seats. They're not loose. FF&E is usually movable equipment and furnishings.
I was wondering if we could use some of that money for that, but the answer is no.
No. It's like bleachers that are attached, some of those specialty things. Yeah.
So when they do the cost estimates and roll that up for us, is it gonna be a fixed number, or is there some sensitivity analysis that they'll do, which is, if we decide to go with the 950, eventually it'll be this cost, if it's, we go up to the 1,300 square feet, if we're talking about a turf field on the soccer field, if we're talking about, are they gonna roll up different options for us to look at?
Yeah, but not in the same way that you would a couple of years down the road at the bid time. So things like the turf field, we're not going to worry about now. That's not part of the budget getting to the grant. That's a down the road, probably add alternate. So things like that, no. There may be some options that we'll have to consider and make some calls on, but not to that extent.
But the implications of that would be if, we're also working towards getting a number out to the town for approval. So if it's not included in that amount, and let's say, we think about turf field 2 years from now, we'd have to go back to the town and get approval for that separately. And it'd be less, it may be less favorable at that point in time, compared to now, for example.
I was just going to say, I think everyone wants, I understand decisions don't have to be made, but we kind of have to have an idea to know what we're asking for. We have one ask to the town
Yeah.
to go to
Right.
referendum.
Yeah.
So
Right.
if we don't,
And
We
they-
should include what things we want, and then, we should include the things we want.
But maybe, Karen, can you explain the allowables? I'm not as familiar. You mentioned this before. When you're saying you're getting closer to either in the project, you make it sound like we can swap things in and out. How does that play out?
I don't know if you can swap things, but when we do the cost estimate, just like when you have a construction budget, say the grant's approved and you're putting together your cost estimate, you're getting your bids back, you carry contingency money. So some of that can be in the contractor's hard costs. We'll carry allowances. If you are going to, for example, to a new site and you weren't sure what would if you were going to run into contaminated soils, but you had some concerns, we would carry a soil management allowance. Sometimes there can be a half a dozen of those. If you don't use them, then you don't spend
So
the
like
money.
risk buckets.
Yeah, when you suspect something. Also, in the construction budget is the contractors or construction managers contingency. So that might be about 3%. Chris is driving me crazy. Oh.
Yeah, Chris,
I
if you
should
wanted
ask
to
Chris,
speak,
do
you
you want
can.
to talk? So in the construction budget, there'll be, say, a 3% contingency, which is a good sum of money. Also, in the owner's soft cost budget, there's an owner contingency. So there are protections there.
So I think, I don't know, maybe it's because we've only been working with rough numbers up to this point. I know there's probably every single person in the community wants to know ultimately what the cost is going to be, and I know it's probably more heavily weighted for different folks than others. So I'd just like to know once we get to that point and we've got the cost estimates, just what's in, what's out, what are the types of things that we would put on the, kind of our parking lot list as to be decided later. So if we can just kind of clarify what's in, what's out when we get to that
Oh,
point, that'll be helpful.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. there'll be a lot to go through.
The estimate that we're going to get will be itemized.
Yeah, it will be itemized per the standard construction sections of work, masonry, electrical, I guess what we're used to seeing. So it's by category, site improvements. And then within that, we'll have discussions about, what that means or what's included, what type of, HVAC systems we included, building materials. So there'll be a discussion. It's certainly not going to submit anything blind without everyone understanding. So.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And I think if I'm understanding right about the process, that someone's going to estimate the cost for everything that we have in here, and maybe it includes some contingencies or multiple layers of contingencies. But then when we go to build and we get to bid, if we decide at that point, hey, we want to put in a turf or whatever we want to do, something additional, then if that could separate the difference between, if one firm says, oh, we'll throw this in, right, like these add-ons. Is that how you kind of?
Well, we would ask bidders to price add alternates, we would call them, separately. So they would give us a standalone price, say, for turf fields.
Yeah.
But we're going to specify grass fields because that's the practical thing. But we'd like to see what it would cost.
Okay.
And so it would be a separate line item, so then you see how your bid pricing comes back. If you did really well, then maybe you can consider things like turf fields.
Right. Okay.
Did Chris want to say anything on the phone?
Well, I think he's on the call.
Chris, you can speak if you.
Yeah, no, I'm here. I'm trying to follow along. It's cutting in and out a little bit. I can't quite tell what you guys are talking about right now.
Tell him to tell you what he just said, right? So he can talk about the question about the seats.
There was a question about the seats, Chris, that you were
the
texting.
Auditorium seating capacity.
Auditorium seating capacity. Whatever you were.
Texting. Yeah. So, excuse me. The way the eligibility works for the auditorium seats is half of the enrollment, the highest enrollment, is what you are allowed to consider fully eligible for auditorium seating. Anything above that, the auditorium seats themselves are reimbursed at 50%. Now, I did hear somebody talking about a 500 or 600 seat auditorium, which is fine. However, that increased square footage for the auditorium proper, where the seats are installed, will be assessed at a limited eligibility formula as well as it goes against your total square footage, which would be more. So right now we're just talking about an additional 350 square feet just for the stage. But if you were to grow the auditorium proper by another 300 square feet, let's just say, to include an additional 200 seats, and I know those numbers don't work, but I'm just rounding, now you're 600 square feet over your maximum allowable square footage, so you'll take a deeper reduction in your reimbursement rate on the overall project cost. And then on top of that, there'll be a reduction based on the limited eligibility of the size of the auditorium and the seating capacity. So you kind of get hit twice with that.
So what drives?
The only way to prevent being hit twice is if you were able to find, let's say, the additional 300 square feet you need for the auditorium seats somewhere else in the building, so that you still remain only 300 square feet over your max allowable.
So Chris, on the form that Tecton provided, they said new auditorium seating area is 3,500 square feet. with 250 to 500 seats. So if I heard this right, the space that the additional 250 seats would sit on would have a lower reimbursement rate than the base 250 seats that we would be fully reimbursed for. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if we don't,
Correct.
so that's without
Now,
increasing the square footage of the
it's
room.
nominal, but it is. What's that?
So that's without increasing the square footage of that room. You're keeping it at 3,500 square feet. You're just increasing the number of seats from the 250, which is the low end, to the high end of 500 seats.
Right, but they'll assess the square footage to the seats as well. They'll take a percentage. I mean, it's not much, but I think we were calculating now. It was like an additional $300,000 of reimbursement lost for the 300 square feet of stage space. So if you were to then do a calculation on the auditorium seating, you're probably looking at another $150,000 to $200,000 of lost reimbursement. So that $300,000 now grows to $500,000. That would be a pure cost to the town.
Okay.
Meaning it would not be reimbursable.
How soon could we get a cost breakdown of that? Because I don't. Maybe it's just coincidence that we're talking 300K, 400K. I thought the overall expansion of the stage was about 300K. But could we get that itemized even as a ROM?
So the 300 to 400 is just for
Get what itemized? You mean?
Everything that you just said.
To be that the 300 square feet is translating to $300,000 of reimbursement.
I think maybe just to clarify, the discussion we were having earlier, my understanding was when we were talking about adding onto the stage square footage as an example, it was approximately 300 to 400K, like top line, gross, just the stage. But we hadn't even talked about reimbursement. We were operating under the assumption that there perhaps wouldn't be any reimbursement for that. So
That's what I was operating under, the assumption
Yeah.
that there wouldn't be.
in addition to that for the auditorium. He's saying in addition to that for the auditorium part of it, if you're going to exceed that 250 seat limit, everything above that, you'll get less money back in the amount of around $150,000 less.
As if we
Costs would be those costs would be assessed at your new construction reimbursement rate is 39%. So let's just call it round up to 40. So anything above the 250 seats would be that cost would be assessed at 20% reimbursement.
But that cost will be
Which
there.
would result in about $200,000.
But that cost is going to be there even with a 950 square foot stage. You're still going to increase the seating, so that cost is there in either case, is it not?
Yeah, it's disjointed from
the staging area. Can I ask, is it possible to get what the state says our auditorium size should be and how many seats and what they would pay and reimburse versus a number of if you want this many seats and this size?
They don't know that. No.
But why?
There's no such thing. I can tell you that the policy at the state for auditorium seating is 50% of your enrollment, the enrollment projection used for the grant application, which is the highest enrollment over the 8-year projection. 50% of that is fully eligible for auditorium seating.
Yeah, I think
Any
that's
seating above that 50% is 50% of your reimbursement rate.
Yeah, and I think that's what
Including
Heather was getting at. Sorry,
with
sorry
that
to cut you off.
additional seat. So if your total auditorium is 3,500 square feet, and you have 300 seats in there, and you're only allowed 250 at your full reimbursement rate, then the additional 50 seats in plus the square footage associated with those 50 seats would be assessed at 50% of your reimbursement rate. Or in this case, 20%.
So
That's a separate calculation that the state does on the side. There's nothing, there's no written, you're just not going to get that. It's something that's tracked off on the side.
Okay, so I think where Heather was going, if you don't mind me jumping in, Heather, she was that's exactly what she was asking, is based on the numbers. So you mentioned the enrollment, it's 50% of whatever our highest enrollment is. That's essentially the starting point for the design on what the state would reimburse. So could you do a cost estimate for us with the baseline starting point is what the state would reimburse, and then if you add, either go to the extreme or do a slight sensitivity analysis and say, okay, in comparison, if we go to a 1,300 square foot stage and 500 seats, then the cost would be X. Because I don't know, maybe it's because it's after 9 o'clock,
No,
and
we
I'm
can
trying
do
to follow all those numbers, but
Chris, we can do that. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
yeah.
The
We
general
can't-
public
no, we
just
can't-
wants a number.
we-
They want a
we can't-
number. They want to know
can't
that
do that
going
because-
above X, what the state is going to cover. They want to know that
What the
this
impact
auditorium
is.
is going to cost us X. They don't care about 50% and reimbursement and half of this and a quarter. They want a number. We need to get to
We
that
can do
number.
that for you.
Yeah, further, I would just say,
Okay.
Chris, what was maybe confusing me is when we talked about the extra space for the auditorium, we were just saying that would all come out of pocket, because our understanding is 83,000, square feet. That's what we're allowed to tell the state, hey, we want to be reimbursed, and here's all the components. If we on our own said, well, we're going to add 300,000 to the stage, it's going to fall out, we're going to pay that net cost, we thought 300,000 was net cost. If you're saying, no, it's actually more than 300,000, because then the state's going to say, oh, you're building something bigger, so we're going to reduce your. I don't understand that math at all.
But they would ding us in any case.
You don't.
They're two
you don't-
separate things, the
Hold-
stage
hold
and
on,
the seating.
Hold on. The reimbursement process does not work that way. The allowable square footage is assessed on the total project budget. You can't say to the state, we're gonna add an additional $300,000 to the stage on our own for the square footage. The state's going to look at the square footage and they're going to reduce your overall reimbursement rate on the entire project. So if your reimbursement rate is 39.64%, which it is right now, and you add 300 square feet for the stage, that represents a reduction in your reimbursement rate of 0.5%. That takes your reimbursement rate down to 39.04%, I believe.
For the entire
which is
project?
the $300,000 in reduced reimbursement.
For the entire project?
You can't just. It's assessed against the total project cost. Correct.
Right, inclusive of this
I'm sorry,
extra
it's
300,
assessed-
inclusive of the
it's
extra
assessed against
300,000?
Your reimbursement rate.
Right.
Right. Which is assessed against the total project cost.
Right,
Not
sorry.
just for a specific area.
Right,
You can't just say, I'm going to add $300,000 to the stage area.
Right. So that reduced reimbursement rate would then apply to the total project cost inclusive of the $300,000, or that additional square footage?
$300,000. The $300,000 would be inclusive of your total project cost.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah,
if you
so I think
take-
incrementally it should still be,
If you could follow along with these numbers, if you take the 83,713 square feet, which is where you are now with the 300 square feet extra of the stage, multiply that times $600 a square foot, you get a total project cost of $50,227,000. Of that $50 million, that $300,000 is included in there. So now you take your regular reimbursement rate of 39.64%, and you get a state reimbursement of $19,900,000. Now, because you're 300 square feet over your allowable, your reimbursement rate is reduced that 0.5% to 39.05%, which means your state reimbursement is now $19,600,000. There's your $300,000 delta that you would not receive state reimbursement.
Works out the same.
Okay. Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks. I
That's
think,
the way it's applied.
Yeah. Okay, that's how the mechanics apply. But net, at the end of the day, if we add space and it's on our own dime, it should just be at the gross cost of it at our own dime when all the math flushes itself out. I understand semantically the marginal rate the effective rate that gets applied is reduced, but okay. Thank you. So.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're going to get a comparison of the min requirement, which is a 950 square foot stage with the 250 seating, and compare that to the max requirement of 500 seats in the 1,300 square foot area for cost. And we'll get that cost comparison so we can see what that looks like. And then, Chris, do you have any other further information about waiver process, and what's your experience with schools trying to get waivers on auditoriums?
No. Waivers on auditoriums? No. Waivers for program space?
So, like for
is much easier to obtain.
Right.
A
So,
waiver for auditorium space is probably not going to happen.
but if it's program space, meaning we have a band that needs to utilize that space, and our band exceeds the current square footage that we had, is there a way to do a waiver because it's part of the program? I mean, the arts program. Yes, Dr. Mack.
Chris, so because it's the STEAM, the entire program is based around the STEAM concept. So the A is the arts, and a huge emphasis on the arts, which would be theater. Do you think, just for the stage, I understand the auditorium, I get it. But for the stage, do you think that we would be able to make that a persuasive argument? I mean, I feel like I can make anything a persuasive argument, but I want to know what your success rate has been in
I
that.
don't know.
Chris, I think part of it, I know I've been successful in the past. I'm thinking about Anna Grace, where the stage was also used as a classroom or for classroom exercises, and it's tied into performing arts. So if you have 8 periods during the day and you say we anticipate the stage is going to be used 7 out of 8 periods a day, it's scheduled for performing arts related curriculum, and kind of spin it that way. I think it would, you never know which way they're going to go, but I think you could make a good case. Chris?
I need a theater teacher.
Yeah, so I
Maybe
think
we lost him.
maybe we did lose him. Yeah, I would definitely be interested in understanding what that waiver process might look like, because, I mean, having, 20 students or so from a class on the stage, what's the square footage of a student in a chair,
You start off by tying it into your curriculum,
Right.
into your STEAM curriculum. I mean, for me, you've got to have that
Yeah.
to move forward. And as I just said, I did
Yeah.
make the case once. The state always changes. Now lately,
Okay.
I'm in the process of doing another one, and everyone is saying, oh, well, forget about it, because now with everything happening, they're really tough. I don't know. Maybe that's true, maybe
Okay.
it's not. But it's certainly worth making a case, and I think that the stage one is valuable. You tie it into the STEAM program, the curriculum. If you can say, the course of our day, there are 7 class periods. We anticipate this space being utilized 6 out of 7 for curriculum-based activity. I don't see.
You do that up front as part of the grant application, or you wait till it flushes itself out?
Is there a downside to submitting a waiver and have it not get approved?
No.
So it
And
doesn't.
you don't do it now anyway. You would do it after the grant. And
After the
road.
grant.
Yeah, it's not something you would do now.
So does that mean we put forward in the grant application a 900 square foot stage?
No. Let us get back to you
Okay.
shortly with an analysis of what what Chris was explaining.
Okay.
I think we should also ask Tecton to do a space plan for us. Just test fit. You know, they can test fit tiers on the stage and see what size it really needs to be. Maybe it needs to be more than 300 square feet. You know, maybe they'll find out it needs to be 1,500. Or maybe they'll find out it could be 800 in a different shape.
Yeah, that's a good point. Knowing how many kids are in the band, how many, people participate in a production, 'cause maybe 1,300 isn't enough, right?
I think they did apply some of the information, I know, but let me check with them as far as the band and number of seats and music stands and that sort of thing. But let me see what they used.
Then quickly too, I agree very much with Ken, and we should take a deeper look at it. If you just look at the band room, is I think last time I saw 1,200 square feet. So now just think about logistically moving the band from a band room that size to a stage that's smaller, plus the wings that you lose. It's just from a logistics standpoint, it doesn't truly make sense. And if we make a stage that's too small to support our programming, it doesn't matter how much it costs. If it's not being used, we're not getting any value of the money we spend. So I think it is really important that we take a look at this and get it right.
Thanks, Shannon.
Can I ask a question about the gym? Are we still debating whether or not we're going half bleachers or full bleachers on the gym?
So right now the spec is for half bleachers.
Oh, okay, because I was wondering if we could utilize half that area towards the stage.
It's already
then,
half.
but- Okay, all right.
If
just
we
wanted
were
to
to
check.
do more than that, we'd have to increase the square
Okay,
footage, which
okay.
probably don't need to do.
I'm just trying to see if we could find other areas, but that answers my question.
And it wouldn't matter necessarily for the auditorium because, again, anything over 250, you're gonna have less reimbursement either way. So you're still gonna hit that reduction. Any other comments, questions, thoughts on what we've been talking about? Are we all ready?
I just want to, Shannon had sent me, she was did a little research on the $1 million from the WIS project. And she did find an article, and it was, it had to do with enrollment was not what the specs, something to do with the specifications and the projections didn't meet the actual enrollments. So they were fined or asked for money back because I would assume, then overbuilt. So I don't know if there's a way to prevent that if we, it's an estimate.
Yeah, I don't think you can prevent that, but
That's why you get your professional enrollment study, to back you up.
I assume they did that with WIS.
91, which is next year, right? So I think we're pretty safe as far as that goes. 492. I mean, that's projected for next year, right?
Right, you
And-
should be pretty confident with that number, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they're all in my class.
They're all in your class. Okay, any other last comments? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? No one wants to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Anyone second it?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.